Good morning, everyone, and today we're checking out a brand new video from Popcross Studios about Dresden, Oakland, and the birth of the RAS Foundation. I have no idea what that stands for, but let's hurry and hop in because this is a long one.
When I first came to this place, I admit that this was never a conversation I believed we would end up having, let alone within a year of my having arrived, and yet, here we are. You were right. That day when I destroyed Baxel's prison and wiped out the majority of the multiverse's overseers, I had been hoping to die. I had even
Ooh.
considered being in the prison myself when I detonated it, but something held me back. I thought it may even have simply been that I was hoping the former Reaper would come for me, and I could give her one final piece of my mind before I was slain.
Ooh.
When I turned myself into this eclectic group of
Damn, I missed a lot of stuff.
allies here in the Sharp gang, I was in fact hoping that Caitlin or Koshmara or someone would simply finish me off and I could finally rest. After 6,000 years, I was ready for it to all be done. But I now see that I did not yet deserve that rest, nor would it have been the right thing to grant me. While I may not have shown it, I saw my punishment in those early days, to remain bound to this group, working to aid you in all your ventures, as truly cruel. Spending the rest of my natural life around people who I assumed despised me, and who had every right to, would feel like an even worse form of isolation than having lived in genuine isolation for so long. Of course, it is true that
He is
many
kind
of
of
this
right.
group were not happy with me, especially my so-called warden, Ms. Jones. Being as opposed to killing as she is, I saw it as cruel punishment for her as well to be charged with keeping an eye on me. And yet, she was the first person to give me the faintest glimmer of hope that this final chapter of my long and, thus far, unpleasant life would be not as awful as I imagined it would be. I went on a few missions with her and others in this group, and begrudgingly did my best to help. A part of me, small and mostly buried, mind you, thought it was endearing how much you all seemed to enjoy going on these quests, even ones as dangerous as taking on the Archon demon armies. This particular day was prior to Ms. Jones beginning her proper training as the new Reaper, so her skills with these
Oh,
abilities were limited, and I was going on missions more often with her. I was with her,
okay.
Benny, and Astra, and this was only the third time we went to a world that had been invaded by the Archon demon Cypherimov, so we were still certain about little
Cypherimov.
regarding her
Hmm.
tactics. We were in a world that reminded me somewhat of Tehran's, albeit where dragons that could speak were the kings and queens of most lands, ruling over humans. We got to the dimension early enough in Cypherimov's assault that only one kingdom was being overrun, and we believed we'd be able to stop her infection from spreading. The
Hopefully.
techno-organic virus Cypherimov uses to make her demons takes over the bodies of existing beings and creatures in the worlds she and her generals assault. But back then, we assumed there would be a way to save these infected people. We spent
There's
hours
not.
upon hours fighting and attempting to find a way to separate the demon virus from the infected, but
Yep,
nothing
there it
seemed
is.
to work. Early on, I hoped I may be able to
Once infected, always infected.
come up with a solution, as this virus seemed to have many similarities to the biomechs I had created. But after a few
Wait,
hours,
what?
I had nothing useful to share, and was rather frustrated that we weren't simply killing these creatures and beings to stop the spread. I was certain this was a pitch Miss Jones would not be open to, until one of these beings got far more close than was comfortable. A partial humanoid dragon being, likely a descendant of both humans and dragons, who had been infected, tackled me to the ground. It pinned me down, and even repelling my magma-coated flesh into it did not remove it from me. I looked briefly
Damn.
into its eyes, and while this isn't a conclusion I'd often come to with so little information, it struck me that this being had no genuine life left in it at all. It was not an infected person, but a husk of its former self, animated by this demon
Oh.
virus.
It's a puppeted body.
Regardless, I thought I was about to lose my life. I'd seen similar beings to this one bite through brick walls on that day, so as it opened its jaws
Damn.
and leaned towards my head, I believed myself to be finished. I still thought then that this result would be best for everyone, and yet, just before being devoured, I heard my name called by Ms. Jones, with a sense of genuine concern. My body was then ripped from under
Someone
the
didn't
demon by
care.
Ms. Jones's mineral magnetism ability, pulling me towards her. The demon had held on and flown over with me, but she pounded it with a stone fist and sent it hurtling backwards. She then very quickly
Nice.
put a hand on my shoulder, glanced me up and down, and asked, "Are you okay?" I'm not even entirely sure how I answered, but I imagine it was a simple, "Yes, I'm fine." That interaction shook and perplexed me. She sounded as
Haha.
though she genuinely cared, and I could not for the life of me imagine why. Surely
So Oakland wants to die, but now he's actually seeing someone that wants him alive and cared for. So now he's even rethinking himself. Should I die?
I could
I
not
doubt
have been
it.
much more than a burden to her then.
I doubt that he's
That
gonna
moment would
die. Is what I
replay in
mean.
my mind infinitely over the next week, but prior to that, soon after on the battlefield, I called to Astra and suggested that she use her abilities as an overseer to look into the energy makeup of these infected and see if they still have the golden energy of a soul within them. I was aware that Ms. Jones had no qualms about killing beings and beasts without one. Astra
That would
did
make
as
sense.
suggested, then promptly told Ms. Jones and the rest of us that seconds after becoming infected, the being's soul energy did vanish from them, essentially proving that they'd been
They
killed
all
and
dead
all that
bodies.
remained was the demon. Of course, this was a somewhat somber moment, but it meant we no longer had to hold back. If you'll recall, we then called you, Heath, and a few others in after that to help, and we did manage to defeat all the demons. At the end of the battle, Benny even came up to me and, in his own way, congratulated me on suggesting to check for soul energy. Prior to that day, I'd have dismissed it as him simply attempting to be irritating and possibly get a laugh out of others, but after
He's a
that moment
friend.
with Ms. Jones, I was actually open to the idea that someone in this group would genuinely pay me a compliment. That day made the first crack in the dam that was my cynical and fatalist ideation of how the rest of my life would unfold, and that crack would only widen as time went on.
Yep, he no longer wishes to die. Well, at least he's starting to feel that way. It's a long road ahead, but he's got plenty of friends.
After that day, I began allowing myself to look for more instances where people in this group genuinely cared. Well, you had long shown clear evidence of that. I admit, prior to that day, I often took your compassion as simply you hoping to prove you'd been right about me all along for your own ego's sake,
Oh, come
which
on,
I
Oakland.
now see was unfair. In between my chores cleaning the shark tank, I was many times roped into conversations with Benny. Prior to that interaction with Ms. Jones, I'd assumed Benny was purposely trying to irritate me when we conversed, and to be fair, he does often work into conversations insulting nicknames for me. But, going
He
forward,
does,
conversing
kind
with
of.
him and his partner, Dr. Champagne, and others, I started to see that he was essentially treating me the same way he does everyone else. Don't misunderstand me, I still think he is a ridiculous and often irritating human being, but I started to see that he was not trying to torment me as I once thought. Plus,
Ah, that's a
well,
good
I
step
shall
forward.
not be saying this to him directly, I actually occasionally now find his manic, confusing nature somewhat entertaining. I then began opening up slightly more myself. Instead of ducking my head and ignoring people as they passed in the halls, I began saying a simple hello or acknowledgement to those such as Mr. Reynolds or Ms. Kuznet when they passed through,
Good,
and
good,
was
good step
surprised
forward.
that I was often then, albeit not always, met with a warm regard back, or even someone stopping to converse with me. I recall one unexpectedly pleasant interaction came when Ms. Maciel and her chatty biomech ally stopped to talk to me for nearly an hour, asking me more about biomechs, which, conversation wise, evolved into other topics as well.
Like what?
Astoundingly, in that chat, she told me that, While she did not approve of what I'd done to the overseers, especially considering she is romantically entangled with one in Tehran and close friends with another in Astra, she
Oh,
also acknowledged that it was understandable why someone would be driven to do what I did. She had faced her fair share of awful overseers. She made sure to reiterate that she still considered it to be a horrible thing to do, killing many en masse, but
yeah.
that acknowledgement that she understood where I may have been coming from, it meant a lot. Now,
Honestly,
while
it
I was
sounds kind of
beginning to
weird. It's like you're killing so many just so that you can then die, and yet you're still alive, which probably is still adding to like your own mental guilt.
greet people in this group more often, I did find it too difficult to attempt to do the same to Caitlin. She, of all people, had no reason to ever forgive my actions. I stole her from her family, allowed her to be tormented in Baxel's prison for decades, essentially all for nothing. Frankly, I still don't understand how she can stand to speak to me. And because I was starting to see that my time with this group may not be so horrible, I think a part of me actually became genuinely concerned instead of hopeful that she may still decide to kill me. But after a few months more of
Oh
me starting
boy.
to accept that people in this group may not despise me as I once thought, the cracks in the dam had grown larger, and then Caitlin came at the dam with a sledgehammer. I was sitting on my own in the dining room eating an admittedly incredibly delicious leftover panini offered to me by Dr. Champagne when Caitlin came into the room and sat down directly across from me with her own food. I was confused and admittedly anxious. She had nodded at me, but after that said nothing. A few moments in, I asked if she wanted me to leave. She then said, "I wouldn't have sat with you if I didn't want to." It
I
genuinely made me
don't know why that made
angry,
me laugh.
and that almost certainly came across in my response as I asked, "Why would you ever want to sit with me?" She said, "Well, you've been here a while now, and I want to see if you're scheming to escape or attack us or something, which might mean I can get Alexis to look the other way and let me kill you. Or see if you really are getting better like Sterling hopes, and you may actually deserve to be in this group, and I'll be able to forgive you for what you did to me." I
And
now
there it
see
is.
that, in my response, a part of me was still looking for her to simply kill me, so I could get out of that conversation and not have to further face her or what I'd done to her. I was being a coward as I replied quite angrily, "You are not the forgiving type, Caitlin. I once saw you stab a man with a piece of glass in Baxel's prison for calling you the most overrated combatant in the arena."
Really now?
She very understandably slammed her fist on the table and replied, "First of all, ew, don't remind me that you were spying on me in there. But two, I've told you before, don't pretend like you know me. That was like 8 years ago. The only reason I know that being part of this group may actually change you is because of how much it has changed me. You've got 1,000 times more changing you need to do than I did, Dresden, but you might actually be able to do it if you stop being such a..." Well, I feel I should not recount the words she used next, but anyhow, there was a significant pause in the conversation after that.
Yeah,
Eventually,
that
I
makes
felt
sense.
simply compelled to ask her, "What does it feel like to have changed as much as you have, especially in such a short time?" She spent a moment, seemingly looking for any malice or insincerity in my question, but then responded, "It's like I'm not even the same person. Or I guess it's like the real me was drowning in mud for most of my life. Then Sterling and the rest of this group helped push enough of it away for me to crawl my way out." She then
Like an
leaned closer
avalanche.
than I was comfortable with and said, "But I still had to be the one to crawl out. Being around good people can help you clear the way, but nobody is actually going to pull you out of the mud. You have to do it yourself, Dresden." I sat and thought on that for a moment. While it was clear there was still a great degree of anger coming from her towards me, I also felt there was some genuine hope in her that I could become a true ally. That was enough to stir hope in me as well, and give the reply, "I will crawl out." She simply
Good,
shrugged and took a
good.
bite of her food, saying, "I hope so, but we'll see." After that, as I'm aware you know, she began joining me for meals more often, once every few weeks or so.
It's a
Alexis
good
and
start.
Kayla and Benny and others showing signs of believing I could be a genuine ally someday was certainly inspiring to a degree, but Caitlin showing a consistent effort to see me as something other than the monster she had every right to consider
Hmm.
me to be.
With the tone he's given it, sounds almost like Oakland is almost speaking this through teals.
I believe
Or at
that
least a
is when my
welling of
change
teals.
truly began. I started to consider then that perhaps not only could the rest of my life actually have a purpose, but it may even have its fair share of pleasant moments if I chose to make a concerted effort to embrace where I was and who I was with. After that conversation with her, I increased my
Hmm.
efforts to engage with others in the building and team. I tried to keep in mind a
He's
concept
opening
that I
up.
know you're quite fond of, that you become the average of the people you spend the most time around. So I attempted to remain open to absorbing the positive traits of these people. I also attempted to be more deliberate and present as I did my chores, taking more pride in making this place
Hmm.
clean and organized as a
Good.
service to this group. Though I think there is a better task that my skills for studying and containing powerful entities could be used for, but we'll get to that in a few moments.
And this is why
First, I
you
should
created a new
explain,
foundation.
well, this not
Foundation, I
so
mean.
little ally beside me, whom I found on a recent venture with two members of this group I never thought I'd go on a private mission with, Caitlin and Koshmara.
Hmm. Alright, now I can't wait to actually see what this whole mission was. Well, at least hear about it, and how he got this Solvelia.
While my past actions obviously more directly impacted Caitlin, my allegiance with Arava meant that Koshmara had more reason to be wary of me than most. I have made some efforts to converse with her, but less so than with others. Anyhow, in the months since Ms. Jones began going through her, as you call it, Reaper solo leveling, she has not been bringing me on missions alongside her as often,
Solo
but it
leveling.
seems she has started trusting me enough to go with others. Caitlin came to me and said she needed my help, and that she had gotten permission from Ms. Jones to take me along on a task. She explained that the
Good,
Archon demon
good.
Eldrorok had been sending demon generals out as scouts to different universes, likely to decide which universe he'd attack next. One had been tracked in a dimension I recently learned about myself, P069, a universe which seems to
Ah,
have creatures
yes.
very similar to ones I studied, prior to Tarsa bringing death to my universe. Creatures that many people in this group refer to as Pokemon. Caitlin and
Pocket
Koshmara had
monsters,
already
yep.
gone to that world to face the demon themselves, and had made a very temporary allegiance with a man named Dr. Faba, who was actually aware that other dimensions existed and had long feared creatures or beings coming from them to attack his world.
And
As
it
a
just so
deterrent, he had
happens.
created his own chimeric beast from DNA of multiple other, what I will call SCPs, from this world to fight under his command. He had ended up making a creature powerful enough that he even put a power suppressant helmet on it to limit its abilities.
Type
And the
null.
creature clearly did not approve of this act. Things went very poorly when the young women traveled with this doctor and his SCP, who he simply referred to as Null, to find the demon general. First, they were met with much resistance from the creatures of this world, many of whom seemed very riled up by the presence of an otherworldly demon. Caitlin and Koshmara were attacked by multiple creatures that sounded very familiar to me before finally finding the demon. In the conflict
Which
with it,
creatures? Or
Caitlin and
what
Koshmara
creatures?
noticed that Null was not following the doctor's orders. It did land a few blows on the demon and proved to be very powerful, even with its suppressant on. But when the doctor was screaming at it to do as he said, it eventually turned on him, and in one quick swipe of its crushing claws, it slaughtered its former master. Koshmara and
And
Caitlin
that's why
tried
you
tending
don't
to the doctor before
and that's why you don't treat Pokemon like slaves, because damn can they kill you.
realizing he had been killed instantly. As they did so, Null chased the demon general off, and they lost track of both. That was when they returned here to get more allies, and they spoke to Benny. He was busy with other matters, but upon hearing what dimension they were working in, mentioned that I was very familiar with the creatures of this world and could be an asset. They came to me asking for assistance in ensuring that the creatures of this world gave them less trouble as they once again tracked down the demon. I agreed, and on the few-hour journey to find the demon general, encountering multiple creatures like I'd once studied and using my knowledge of them to help Koshmara and Caitlin evade them, reawakened some passion I'd once had for working at the SCP Foundation. It had been a frustrating profession at many points, but there was a genuine level of purpose I felt from working there, even though it was essentially all a con created by Tarsa. But still, I recalled the positive feelings that came with knowing I was protecting others and getting an opportunity to study intriguing creatures. And as I've said, I think that skill set could be useful to us again. But anyhow, when we were near our target, the SCP that had slain the Doctor, Null, re-emerged, seeming to be tracking the demon itself still. It was very defensive upon seeing Koshmara and Caitlin, and they asked what I knew of this being. But I didn't recognize it.
I got nothing.
The Foundation I'd worked for had been working on making its own SCPs from other creatures like the ones now in P-069, but I had never seen a result like this Null creature before. Still, I felt I did know what to do, given the level of intelligence implied by what they told me of their encounters with it, and given its canine-like mannerisms. I crouched, did not make direct eye contact for long periods, and very slowly approached, calmly asking and gesturing if it wanted its helmet removed. Looking back, I see that this was an odd inclination for me to remove something allegedly containing an entity's power, but everything I'd learned thus far suggested that
while it did limit his powers, it also pissed him off.
The only malice this creature had was towards the Doctor who'd put the helmet on it, as well as towards the demon that it still seemed intent on tracking and killing, in alignment with our own goal. It was still defensive as I approached, but it did allow me to reach it. I inspected its helmet, but could find no way to remove it. I asked Caitlin for the use of her knife, but progress was still slow even with that. I felt I was starting to weaken the device, but before I could remove it,
in-game, all you have to do is just get it to a high enough level. I have no idea how you would actually remove it.
In general, apparently deemed it beneficial to get the drop on us, and came out of nowhere to attack Koshmara, likely recalling her to be the most dangerous between her, Caitlin, and Null. I then looked the SCP directly in the eyes and promised I'd help remove the helmet as soon as the demon was defeated, then turned to join the battle. Koshmara, Caitlin, and Val were all... Apologies. To clarify, Val is what I've been calling the late Doctor's creature. Anyhow, these three were more...
And you know what? That makes a whole lot of sense because of its evolution's name, Solvalia. So calling it Val is actually pretty good and on point. Dr. Oakland, I like ya.
More effectively combating the demon than I was, as I was trying to analyze its movements and strikes for any evident weaknesses or shortcomings. Unfortunately, it then came for me, grabbing me by the neck and head, clearly threatening to tear my head from my body. Both Koshmara and Caitlin held back after that, but Val seemed furious at this sight. Suddenly, cracks started forming on the helmet, then grew more and more until the helm shattered to pieces, revealing the creature's head and unleashing its full power. It was suddenly able to move so fast that it was barely visible and tackled the demon off of me. With this creature now at its full power, it was arguably as mighty as Koshmara in her full demon form. Those two working in tandem were soon able to finish off the general. Then, promptly afterwards, Val came to me showing clear signs of concern for my well-being. It was a genuinely heartwarming feeling to have this creature's concern. While I hope it's clear how much I truly appreciate how welcoming this group has been in spite of everything I've done, the idea of having a creature like this care for me felt almost like a sort of sign. The version of me I'd been for much of my life would not be trusting enough to partner with any sort of similar entity.
Unknown rule of Pokemon is that you may choose the Pokemon, but the Pokemon also has to choose you.
And yet, my desire to keep this creature felt like acknowledgement of my having stepped into a true new chapter. It was actually Koshmara who suggested I bring Val back to the shark tank with me. It had been made in a lab by a now deceased doctor, so it likely had no home to return to. I was
Oh yeah,
uncertain
even
about what
then.
others would say of this idea, but here we are. So I suppose on top of finally acknowledging that you were indeed right about me, I'd also like to make a formal request to keep Val as my creature ally. Though I understand if this is not acceptable, as I am not in a position to be making such a bold request. But
I
finally,
wonder who he's
on
been
top of
talking
that, I
to.
have one more proposal to speak with you about. One that I think may actually help redeem my past actions, as well as hopefully help many others redeem themselves as well.
Oh, and here we go. The birth of the new foundation. And again, I wonder who he's been making this talk to. I'm guessing it's the warden, but I will find out.
Well, I am aware that our main task at the moment is finding and defeating the Archon demons. We do still often come across beings who are not demonic in nature and need to be defeated, then contained. Sometimes in prisons unavailable in their own worlds. While I have become quite proficient in cleaning the shark tank, it is a waste of my skill set in securing and containing dangerous entities, as I did in the SCP Foundation and in Baxell's prison. Along with that, I now have much more faith that, as I'm seeing in myself, perhaps it is true that anyone can change. That given the right
Correct.
environment and people around them, anyone can develop a genuine desire to become better. And
He's
so
right.
my proposal is to create what would essentially be a new version of Baxell's prison, but not made simply to lock away and forget about dangerous beings and creatures. A place to, yes, keep them contained, but one that is actively built and structured around trying to help redeem them. Or, in the least, give true beasts a place to live out the rest of their days safely and happily enough away from others.
Now that's an
I mentioned
idea.
this in passing to Benny when I was conceiving the idea, and his recommended name admittedly does sound somewhat silly, but I can't help but remain stuck on it. The Redemption Arc Support Foundation, or RAS Foundation for short. To put it in Caitlin's terms, I may still be actively crawling out of the mud myself, but as I am doing so, I feel compelled to try and help others to do the same.
It just feels
Of course,
right.
this would be no small task. We'd need to find people willing to work in it, to help the patients and keep them from escaping, but with your permission, I could begin making preparations and scouting locations for where it could be built. While I do so under the watch of Ms. Jones and the rest of this group, I feel this is a better
I actually am curious. Where would you build this new foundation? A whole new dimension? A known dimension? Or what?
use of the rest of my life than simply cleaning and helping on occasional missions. Few people have my skills for containment, and as I've seen, this group has no shortage of contacts who could do great things in helping redeem lost souls. Though, perhaps I am getting ahead of myself. This is a lot to put on you at once, so before you give me your thoughts, I would just like to say thank you, Sterling. If it was not for you having faith that there was better in me, I don't think any of the changes I've gone through would have been possible in the first place, nor do I
That's who
think
he's
the
been
others
talking
would
to.
have been quite as open to accepting me as they have been. Dresden, this is all incredible, and you are very, very welcome. Honestly, I've actually been talking to the headmistress at the Trismegistus Academy about building something pretty much like what you just pitched.
Yes,
And I've
yes.
been hoping we would be able to use your skill set in constructing it and running it. So, well, you'll probably have to confer with Alexis, too. From me, it's all a yes. Yes to keeping this Sylvally as your pet/partner, yes to building the RAS Foundation, and heck yes to you realizing that even you can change.
Oh,
Thank
I
you,
love this little
Sterling.
story.
You will not regret these decisions. Now, since this conversation has gone as well as it has, I feel comfortable enough to ask a very uncomfortable question.
Oh?
This is something that, had I realized it upon first arriving here, I'd likely have been sent spiraling. but thankfully it only dawned on me a month ago or so. I have long believed that at some point after Astra became the overseer of this world, taking over the position from her mother, that she killed Tarsa, as I believed Astra hated her almost as much as I. But I recently realized
Okay.
she never explicitly said that she did this. So I must ask, as I imagine you would know and have deliberately, though very understandably, kept this from me, is Tarsa still alive? Yes, she is.
Uh-oh.
The space race
Oh.
between the United States and the Soviets.
It's war.
Let's get him then.
All engines running. On July 12th. How are we supposed to get to the...
As I suspected. And is she contained? Absolutely. Astra stripped her of all of her powers and locked her away in a pocket dimension that we used to refer to as Hell. She had actually
Thank
created
goodness.
this pocket dimension when she was an overseer and had access to the multiversal orb to contain a man called Lucifer that she was briefly friends with at a time that Alexis and I fought a while back. Either Alexis, Astra, or I go back to this pocket dimension once a month or so to check on her, but besides that, she's essentially just living out the rest of her life in solitary confinement.
Good.
It was Astra's
good.
choice, as she thought it was better punishment than death. Tarsa was desperate to always be in control of any world she was in, all the way back to the first world she oversaw as some kind of ancient Greek god or something.
Oh,
so to have power
shit.
over nothing for a few decades before she died of old age and confinement, Astra decided that was pretty fitting punishment. I've spoken to Tarsa in there a few times myself, and you know I'm optimistic about people being able to change, but I can't say I have any hopes she ever will. I've honestly encountered demons with more compassion.
Ah.
Well, I believe at some point I will want to speak to her, to see how this new version of myself reacts to the being who broke me so completely in early life. But I think for now it is best if I focus on this new foundation to be. Besides, if I were
Yes.
to attempt to help redeem anyone from my past, I think I'd sooner attempt to bring Arava around. Perhaps that is overly optimistic to think she could change, but I once thought the same thing about myself. So, who knows? Perhaps even Fear herself can be redeemed, if we can make her an early patient at the RAS Foundation. Well,
That would be a
Dresden,
good
I'm
idea.
excited to find...
But, first you technically need to go grab her. She's been stripped of pretty much all her powers and is stranded on an island. You'll have, I'd say maybe a week before she's just a corpse on a beach.
Find out with you. Let's get building.
Actually, maybe she still has immortality, I don't know. But yeah, y'all better go save her if you want her. She could be a powerful ally as well. Love the artwork and I love the Savali, I hope you pronounce
It's
it.
funny to me how this same script read by Benny Sharp would have been like 18, 19 minutes long, but read by Dresden Oakland, it was half an hour long. Very different speech patterns from those two. But anyway, if you enjoyed this, it could be kind of fun to go all the way back to Dresden Oakland and the death of the SCP Foundation. Or if you haven't checked out Mytholethal, you might want to start watching that series, which is 4 episodes in, and I may have just subtly started laying the groundwork for the crossover. Or maybe The Summoner's Beasts, which is a story revolving around Tayron that's going right now, that's about him.
So many
You know,
stories.
definitely not just building a Pokemon team. But besides that, that's all for today, except, of course, for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note. And
What
the thought
you
I
got?
want to leave people with today is paraphrasing a quote that I read this week, which is that you can't always guarantee that you're going to have a good day, but you can always approach a bad day with a good attitude.
Now
It's not
that's how you
necessarily
do
going to
it.
mean that you're going to have fun all day, but it can remind you that every challenge of that day is an opportunity for growth, and whatever happens doesn't then have to ruin your whole week or month. I hope that's inspiring. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Friday. Goodbye.
Alright everyone, that's going to be the end of today's video, and I hope you all enjoyed. Just remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Link to the original will be in the description below, and I'll see all of y'all next time when we flick back on. Till then, this is Fox, signing out. Peace.